Food and Wine Insider is a weekly look at a $1.5 trillion industry touching every American. Visit us at foodandwineinsider.com.
We have Terry Howard and Jill McCauley, who are co-owners of The Invisible Chef. Include lots of different baking mixes. Some are coffee and tea cakes or baked quick breads, bed and breakfast favorites, and other such delightful. So welcome to Food and Wine Insider.
Thanks, Anne. It's great to be here.
What I'm going to do, since I have both of you on the call, is I probably will pose a question to one of you so that we don't miss hearing something from each of you. So, Terry, I'm going to start with you. Tell our audience a little bit about what you were doing prior to 10 years ago when you created The Invisible Chef.
Well, I have quite a varied background, but it's all been in one industry, and that's the food industry. I owned a restaurant many years ago. I worked for large food companies. I was a rep in the housewares industry for a long time, and I just have a love of food. My degree is in food science and nutrition, so I just love food. And so many years ago, I was looking around. I was actually even representing food companies, and I was looking around to see what might be missing. And it was really before the whole specialty food industry exploded. And I came up with a line of coffee and tea cakes called The Invisible Woman. And I just thought they would be kind of a great natural because the tea industry was blossoming then, and there were tea rooms everywhere. So it was just kind of an idea I had, and I started in my basement while I was still working as a sales rep in the housewares industry. So it just kind of grew from there. I did everything, like I said, in my basement. I did sell to about 28 states, and then kind of things in my life started to change. So I sort of gave it up and really concentrated again on my rep company. I opened a showroom in the Columbus Gift Mart, and that's when I met Jill.
And so there's a Jill story to hear, because sometimes co-owners have a perfect sort of yin and yang. And Jill, what did you bring to the party when you met Terry and brought this concept forward?
Well, when I met Terry, I was working in a different showroom, but to go backwards from there, so I definitely had a sales background, same as Terry. So that's the one portion of both of our resumes that's kind of the same, as we both came out of sales. But I came direct from manufacturer. So I worked for a large chocolate manufacturer as one of the sales managers. There was 2 sales managers at the time, and we split the country. Prior to that, I was in retail environment. So I moved from being a buyer in retail over into selling to the retail market. So actually, one of the companies that I was a buyer for became one of my largest customers when I was with a chocolate manufacturer. And then when I left that company, I also did packaging sales. So really having a manufacturing background as well as kind of some of the packaging background really helped. And then when you take that piece and put it together with Terry's food science background, it kind of carved the niche for both of us and helped us really divide kind of where the responsibilities were going to lie with the company. So, and then we both roll up into sales, which is, obviously the most important part of the company is how we actually are going to sell the product and get it to the marketplace.
I think that's very interesting to actually hear 2 women who have been in sales, because it's typically quite male-dominated. So I really respect the fact that you've been successful in that particular field. Terry, as you thought about how you were producing the products initially, how did you go about it? Were you hand-making them? Did you have a co-packer? Just curious. And typically what we see is people tend to go out to a contract packer to produce the products. But how did you all start?
Well, I had some recipes still from the company, the Quiet Woman, and they were just sort of sitting, in the dusty hallways of my head. And I had told Jill about the company, and when she can probably tell this story better, but I had started actually making these in my basement. But when with the Quiet Woman, but when we started the Invisible Chef, we went out to a co-packer, and we found a great partner, and we've stuck with them since day one. We have a great relationship with them, and they work with us. They really don't do any other blending or packing for any other companies. They have a different niche, so it has worked out perfectly for us.
So you've maintained the recipes, and they're basically producing it for you?
Correct. I develop all the recipes, all the formulas. We actually do. Jill actually does all the purchasing. We purchase everything, and then we ship everything to the plant. They store it, they blend it, they ship it.
Very good. So you kind of created that sort of separation so that you maintain the control. How many items were in the line originally, and how many items do you have today? Because I was looking at all these different products and going, wow, that sounds like a lot of SKUs.
This is Jill. I can take that one if you want. It is kind of a lot of SKUs. And when we really first started, just to kind of tag into Terry's story of how we started this company, I actually had a customer come to me who was a large national fundraising company, and they were specifically looking for baking mixes. And I had worked with them for a long time selling them chocolate. And so they came to us. So really, the company was born in kind of a backwards fashion. We had a customer that was interested in a baking mix before we even had a company. And that's when I took it to Terry and I said, wow, this customer just called me. They're looking for baking mixes. And do you know anybody or any companies, because she's a manufacturer rep, that we could take this to? And that's when we kind of went back to the Quiet Woman and translated it over into the Invisible Chef. So when we really started, we were pitching about 3 to 4 items to that company. The funny part is we never got a single sale from them, but they really inspired us to start this company and put us on the map. So then when we started with an actual line and we said, okay, well, we didn't get anything with them, but we've put so much time and effort into this, what do we do? We started with about 6 coffee and tea cakes, and we had 2 of our Bake It Quick breads at the beginning. So we started with about 8 SKUs, and we did the development of the packaging, and we had the formulas ready, and we were kind of ready to go. My husband is a CPA, so he's kind of given us some financial advice throughout the years, but at the very beginning, he said, I wouldn't put any money into the packaging until you really see what's going to happen with a customer. So we took the line and put it into a show in Terry's showroom in a regional mart, and we had a very large customer come to us. And so one of our first sales was, full pallets. And so we started with those 8 SKUs and grew from there. We now have probably 45 to 50 SKUs under the Invisible Chef line, and quite a few others that were developed under another line that we do, Jazz Gourmet Food Company. And then we have a lot of formulas for private label that we also formulate and produce for them.
Well, terrific. Well, with us today is Terry Howard and Jill McCauley. They are co-owners of the Invisible Chef. Jill, I'm going to continue with you. Because you have so many items in the line, how do you determine which items stay in the line and which items do you actually cull, if in a polite way, I suppose, or delist from your line as you go forward?
That's the one thing that's really hard when you're so emotionally invested in an item, because you've done testing and development, and sometimes the ones that we love the most don't always get the most recognition. So that is hard because you do become emotionally attached to every item. But at the end of the day, it really just comes down to what's selling and what's trending. So we've picked up sometimes on really trendy items, and then we've seen that trend kind of cycle and go through the motions very, very quickly. Sometimes some things last for a long time, like we still have a lot of cupcake kits that went back 4 or 5 years when the cupcake craze hit the nation. But then there are other things like donut kits that really fizzled out quicker. And so that's really how we make the determination. I mean, it's an emotional decision for us because we love all of our products, but at the end of the day, there is a lot of SKUs, and it's a lot of packaging to carry and a lot of ingredients to carry. So if something's not working, it really comes down to a numbers game.
And for our listeners, when we say SKU, which is SKU, it means stock keeping unit, which tends to be a retail term in terms of your product being a single product being on the shelf. So when you hear that word SKU, it's actually an acronym, SKU, or stock keeping unit. Terry, I'm going to turn back to you. What makes your products really different from the competition?
Well, we like to think of our product as special, obviously, as most people do. But when we came up with this, we really wanted to have some innovative flavors in the line, not just your regular lemon poppy seed cake, which we do have, but we also like to add things like a chocolate, the chocolate spicy cake. We call it a chocolate, what do we call that, Jill? It's a
chocolate and ancho chili.
Yeah, chocolate, cinnamon, and ancho chili. And it's kind of a really fun, it's a brownie cake in a cake pan. And people always, when we are at the shows, they come by and they say, what? That's going to be too spicy. And then they taste it and say, oh, no, there's no spice at all. Well, it just kind of hits you as it's going down. But we just like to do some fun, trendy things. We like to stay on top of the trends. We can react quickly. We have on all our boxes some chef's tips, so you don't have to just make a maple oat cake, for instance. We have recipes that you can add to the cake and make it a little bit fancier and make it your own.
Okay.
And our packaging, we feel.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say our packaging is beautiful. We have a team that works with us, so we have beautiful, eye-catching, appetite appeal on our packaging.
Well, talk a little bit about that. What makes it appealing? Describe the packaging for listeners who can't see it.
Well, as you're looking at the front of the packaging, you are going to see a beautiful shot of the item. And it is really tempting for you to pick up that box, look at the box, and we pay attention to every side of the box. So you pick up the packaging because of this beautiful picture on the front, and we do all of our own photography. You look at the rest of the box, and it has all of the information, some ideas how to use it, recipes on ways to make it your own, a few different ways to, that you can work with it, or you can just make it as is, and it will obviously still be delicious. But we have some very cute graphics, beautiful photography, and now we are expanding into doing baking kits, and so we are adding more and more components to these.
Okay, and you talked a little bit earlier about having originally sold some of your products to wholesale versus retail, and it seemed a little serendipitous. As you started to think about where you wanted to sell the products, what were the ideal locations that you feel your products should be sold in? Jill, why don't you take that question?
Sure. Well, we really kind of concentrated on wholesale because when we were talking about our background, we both had a wholesale background, so that came naturally to us. So ironically, that's where most people start retail and then move into wholesale. We started in wholesale and kind of worked backwards, and it wasn't until much later that we had our own retail site and developed our e-com site. So we really feel like our products go into upscale gourmet stores, upscale gift stores. We have some upscale grocery lines that, 8 to 10 chains that carry our product. That's kind of where we see our biggest fit, but we've sold to some of the largest retailers in the country. So it's a nice niche, and there's always when somebody's telling a story in their stores or trying to tell a story to the consumer, when you have beautiful packaging, appetite appeal graphics, it kind of really helps sell that. So if they're doing a statement for the holidays, we help them pick red and green that can kind of offset batter bowls or cupcake pans. It's not really very fun and romantic to show a muffin tin. A whole lot more fun if you can put a beautiful package of, different flavor muffins that sit right next to it and tell the whole story to your customer.
And are your products sold dry, or are they sold in a different form? I just want to be sure I
Yeah, they
knew
are
that for
definitely
sure.
all dry mixes. Everything are dry mixes, and there's usually 2 to 4 at the most ingredients that you need to add in, all very basic stuff: milk, eggs, butter, oil, every once in a while sour cream or, an item like that, but very, very basic things that we find most people have at home already. So really when you buy the mix, for the most part, you're ready to make it as soon as you get home. Everybody pretty much has everything that you would need to bake these off.
Well, again, with us today is Terry Howard and Jill McCauley. They are co-owners of The Invisible Chef. And I was looking at your website, and it's quite inviting. You have so many different types of products. You have quick breads and donuts and muffins and pancakes and waffles and scones and bakeware and so on. So it's a pretty extensive line. Talk to us, Terry, a little bit about the consumer. How would you define the person who is most likely to be attracted to your products, and how do you go about reaching them?
Well, nowadays where everybody is so busy and there is so much information out there about cooking and baking, and there's some beautiful print magazines out there, I think it can get a little intimidating and overwhelming. And so I think we are geared towards just about anybody who wants to put a beautiful dessert on their table, but just doesn't have the time or the inclination to bake something as simple as a quick bread or as involved as an almond marble cake, which you can do putting together 2 of our cakes. So we've got the mom who wants to bake with her child but doesn't want to go out and buy all the ingredients and have such a mess. This really gives that shortened version. You can still bake with your kids. You can still teach them. It can still be a teaching moment with the kids, learning how to measure, and then you can come up with a product within minutes instead of, children don't have the time that it takes or the attention span that it takes to really bake from scratch. And sometimes the moms don't either. So I think it's going to be busy moms. It's going to be working people. It could be just about anybody who wants a delicious dessert on their table but doesn't want to spend all that time and money on buying ingredients that they may never use again.
Okay, and this question's for Jill. I'm thinking about, we're heading into the holiday season. Talk a little bit about how important that season is to you, and how do you promote your products for the holiday season?
Well, obviously baking, as the temperatures start to cool down and, we go into Halloween and Thanksgiving and then obviously Christmas, that is the most important time for most people from a baking perspective as well. So we really try to promote through some really inviting videos. We're really putting a lot of effort and time in behind our social media presence. We really find people that are starting to follow us to look for great tips. But it's just really important to show, like Terry said, multiple uses for one product. One of the things we're coming out with for Christmas that we're really, really excited about is our cookie exchange kit. So it's a brand new item. Terry kind of alluded to the fact that we're moving into some of the kits and full baking experiences. And this is the first effort that we have that's really got national recognition. So we have these cookie exchange kits that was brought to us by a great partner. The buyer came to us much younger and has kids and said, I could get invited to a cookie exchange party, and I just feel like I have no idea what to bake. I have no idea if I can bake something good enough to share. And so she posed that question to us, and so we came up with a kit that makes over 4 dozen cookies, and everything's in there except for, again, the few ingredients like butter and eggs. So you have a cookie mix, you have the sprinkles to make them really fun and festive, and so everything you need is in one kit that you can take to a cookie exchange party, and you know that you're going to be serving something great that you can share with your friends and not worry about it. So it's just interesting when you talk to somebody who doesn't have a background in food and doesn't necessarily know how to bake, what some of their what makes them nervous going into the holidays. And some of it is as easy as, like, I don't know how to bake a really good cookie. Can you help me out with that? And so that's where we're really going to start to see the trends moving, is with these complete baking experiences where we give you, for every holiday, for Halloween, for Easter, an idea of something that you could bake for yourself, bake for your family, or something that you can easily share if you have guests coming.
And I guess I just didn't know. I didn't know about cookie exchanges. How big a behavior is that?
It's really very trendy right now. Women it's like the bunko of the holidays. Women want a reason to get together, open up a bottle of wine, serve a hot toddy, have some girlfriend time away from home. And so it's very trendy right now. And so the timing for this is really perfect, I think, with, the holidays coming up, number one, but really enjoying a trend that we're really seeing across the nation where women are wanting to get together and have something to share, and then also something to take home and share with their family at the end of the night.
They come together and they share cookies, and then everybody gets to have some of the other cookies to bring home. Is that kind of the
right?
idea?
You would box it up. Yeah, each person would bring, like in our case, you would bring the 4 dozen cookies. If you're going to have more people, you can buy both kits. We have a vanilla sugar and a chocolate peppermint, so you could come to the party with eight dozen cookies. And so then what you would do is each person decides how much they're going to take home. So if it's like 6 of each cookie, you just walk through the line, fill up a box with 6 of every cookie that your guest brings. And so when you go home, you have a box of cookies that you can put out a beautiful cookie tray for the holidays. Or in my case, I would probably eat them before the holidays happen. But
yeah.
The idea is you're supposed to save them. Right, save them for the guests. But, I have kids, so we would still eat them.
Yeah. Jill, I'm going to stay with you because you brought up something about social media, and I would love to hear what your advice is to other budding entrepreneurs on, so what should they do in social media? How should they approach it? How should they use it? How does it help? Those kinds of things. And what have you learned that you could pass along?
Well, we honestly were really not. This was not our niche at all, neither Terry or I. So we really looked to, we worked at first with the person who did some of our graphic design and photography, and they kind of helped us get everything set up and get started down the right path with that. We have used lifestyle influencers to help us with photography, also to help us with videos. But really, it's so important to have all of those pieces and those components to show. And the wonderful part about Instagram or Facebook is you can show those daily if you want, or every other day you can be in front of your consumers. You can't really do that in a retail store. Like, I can't be in front of, my chocolate peppermint cake and showing you how to make it as a bundt and drizzle chocolate syrup over top of it and put crushed peppermint canes on it. You can't really do that in a retail environment. In Instagram, you can show a 60-second video that shows you exactly how to do it, and we find that it really starts getting our customers thinking. We developed a whole portion of our website for recipes called Think Outside the Box, because really at the end of the day, this is a box mix. The fun part is getting everybody involved in how I can make this chocolate peppermint loaf cake into something much more fun, beautiful bundt cake that I feel proud to put on my table.
Well, that's terrific. Again, we've been talking with Terry Howard and Jill McCauley. They are co-owners of the Invisible Chef that include lots of different baking mixes. Terry, I'm going to turn to you. A couple of years ago, you created a line of Jelly Belly baking mixes through a license with Jelly Belly. I don't see a lot of licenses with entrepreneurs. What are the joys and pitfalls of licensing with a big company like Jelly Belly?
Oh, that is a good question. Jelly Belly is a great company. They have great name recognition. They have great products. And we really thought that making Jelly Belly baking mixes would be a natural. And so we did. It was a lot of work. It's a lot of work to work with a company like that because they have a lot of rules and a lot of policies you need to follow. So it was so different than what we were used to doing. we would talk about, hey, let's make a chocolate peppermint cake. Okay. And a week later, we have a chocolate peppermint cake that we feel, we test and, we put it out a little bit, see what people think, and then it can be in our line. Well, with the Jelly Belly, that took a lot longer. It took us a couple of years to finally come up with a line. And in the end, while we did sell some, it did not sell like we thought. The consumer just, I don't know, didn't get it. When they think of Jelly Belly, they think of candy. They don't think of baking mixes. They didn't think of a Jelly Belly cupcake. So in the end, it didn't turn out like we had hoped, or maybe like Jelly Belly had hoped. But it was a fun learning experience.
I thank you for sharing that, because sometimes the experience is as valuable as the opportunity. I wanted to ask you again, Terry, obviously you and Jill are very involved in the business. Who else is involved in the business, and what's their role?
Well, basically, Jill and I do a lot of things. Like she said, her husband is a CPA, so we've been very lucky. And so he does our books and our financial advice. And then we have the co-packer, and then they have a whole line of people down there that we work closely with. And of course, throughout the year, during the busiest season, there are more people, but then during the slower seasons. But there are a core group of people down there that we work very closely with. We also have independent sales reps throughout the country. We do the trade shows. So that's basically the way we operate.
And talk, maybe I could turn to Jill. How important are those trade shows to getting distribution for your product line?
Oh, for us, it's been huge. And, we were fortunate that we had both done fancy food shows in our past experiences, so we kind of had that background to draw from a little bit, so we knew how important it was to our business as we were trying to grow it. We don't have, like as Terry said, there's not a lot of us, so we don't have a lot of feet on the street. So trade shows are the easiest way for us to get in front of the maximum amount of buyers in a very, very short time. And we have definitely, through the fancy food shows, met some of our biggest customers. The other great thing about it is it's free feedback. There's been a lot of times that we were launching a product line that we thought was absolutely perfect. In our mind, we were like, okay, I'll give you an example. We called it the Bakery Inspired Collection of Cakes. And so there was a little bit more to them. Instead of just, one packet, we came up with, 2-packet kits, and we thought that they were going to be a slam dunk. We showed it at 2 different shows, and we had a lot of comments on it and some feedback from customers, basically buyers really at the shows, on different ways they'd like to see that product line, but you get invaluable feedback when you're trying to launch something. And for us, it just didn't make sense to go forward with that line. So we table it. Will it resurface later? Possibly. But yeah, it's a great way to really get in front of a mass amount of people in a very, very short time.
And Terry, can you talk a little bit about how you have and what it's going to take to continue to scale up and expand?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear how. Talk about.
Talk about how you have funded the business and what you're going to need in terms of further scaling and expansion.
Well, basically, Jill and I started out, we both had jobs, and we did that for quite a while. I had the showroom. She was working in another showroom. Then she left and started working for a packaging company. And so we had jobs for quite a while before we felt that we could both quit those jobs and do this full time. So we started with a minimal amount of money, really. It's almost laughable, and we were just so lucky that our first order was a huge order, and we pulled it together. We placed that order, and that is kind of how we just grew organically. Now, of course, as the years have gone by, we have pulled out some money from our line of credit, and we do use that occasionally. But I think at this point, we would love to get to the next level, and I do think we have to seriously think about bringing on somebody else. We just haven't been able to find that right partner yet.
Okay. And I probably have time for one last question, and this is for either of you. As you think back on the last 10 years, what would you impart as some of the major lessons learned? Let's pick two. I'll give you each one. Lessons learned on the business. Terry, you first.
Just me first. Okay, lessons learned. Well, I think I'd go back again to working with a licensing. It sounded great at the time. I think you have to just do a little more due diligence into what it would entail. I think we had stars in our eyes, and we loved the idea that we would be connected with a company like Jelly Belly, and maybe that's something, sometimes you just take a risk and you just don't know. So that was a risk we took, and a lesson learned.
And Jill, for you?
I think for me, just be prepared. It's a roller coaster ride. I mean, there are definitely highs and lows to owning your own business, and we've been on some of the highest highs. And, we've had some times that are low because not everything works. And when it is your own business and it's just, for the most part, it's Terry and I, we live and breathe this. And so for us, things that we think are a natural fit for our company, for our line, don't always work. So there are some times when you have to be very, very careful about not getting down on things, because it always goes back up, and then there's the ultimate high. So for me, I just think just be prepared. We were so at the very beginning, we used to say, isn't it amazing that we've been doing this for 3 years and we've never made a mistake? I mean, literally, we used to say that, and then we started making mistakes. The bigger you get, the bigger the mistakes, too. So everything in owning your own business you have to look at as a lesson learned. And again, I go back to I'd rather fail trying than not try at all. So just be prepared. That's what I would say. That's the biggest advice. Be prepared.
Well, that's wonderful advice. And I want to thank Terry Howard and Jill McCauley, who are co-owners of The Invisible Chef, for being on Food and Wine Insider. And John, I'm going to turn it to you so that we can be sure our listeners know their website.
Again, for our listeners, your website?
The website is www.theinvisibleChef.com.
A link to that website will be on foodandwineinsider.com tonight, where you can hear this and every other past and future program, and you can tell us a guest you'd like to hear. Terry and Jill, if I'm sitting here listening to, and I was just fascinated by it all. Thank you so much for being with us. To be successful, most restaurant owners require extra capital from time to time. When you need funding to renovate, buy equipment, or manage cash flow, you don't have time to track down financial statements or wait weeks for a decision. That's where Kabbage can help. Kabbage gives small businesses access to a line of credit of up to $200,000. Apply online and you'll get a decision right away. Since Kabbage is a line of credit, you can take the exact amount you need. You never have to reapply to take additional loans, and you'll only pay for the funds you use. Kabbage has helped more than 230,000 businesses from every industry, and with $4 billion in funding, Kabbage is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau and was named the Forbes Top 100 Companies twice in a row. Check out Kabbage at cabbageWithAK.com/foodandwine, and you'll get a $50 gift card when you qualify. That's KABBAGE.com/foodandwine.
Line of credit is subject to credit approval. See terms and conditions. All cabbage business loans are issued by Celtic Bank, a Utah chartered industrial bank, member FDIC.
And I'm really looking forward to our next guest because, you know me, I always look backwards more often than I look forward. And she is Amber Lamke of Maine Grains. And she is bringing back the traditions of stone milling of grains. And I'm really looking forward to the interview. Amber, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be with you.
Now, without further ado, here's Ann Daw.
Thank you, Don. Just by way of introduction, Amber Lamke is president of Maine Grains and founding director of the Maine Grain Alliance. Amber, you've been leading Maine Grains, a wholesale manufacturing facility specializing in locally sourced organic stone mill flour and oats for the past 8 years. Could you please talk to us about your passion in grains?
Absolutely. Grains was actually not my background originally. But I got involved in an effort to bring together grain growers and millers and wood-fired oven builders back in 2007 with an interest in figuring out how we could grow more grains in our region for delicious bread, really as part of the rise in the local food movement, which was gaining steam. So grains were really a missing part as farmers markets were gaining in popularity and people were turning their attention to sourcing more food locally. So I really came on the scene as an organizer, trying to help bring voices together to brainstorm, and out of that led the idea to start a business and a mill.
Fantastic. You stone grind the grains to maintain their nutritional content. Could you describe a little bit the process and the benefits for our listeners?
Yes, absolutely. So what we're doing here at Maine Grains is we're specializing in locally sourcing grains from area farms. We use special machinery for cleaning those grains before we mill them into flour or roll oats. And our milling technology is on traditional 4-foot diameter stone mill stones that grind very slowly and at cool temperatures to preserve the nutritious oils in the flour. So that is one of the traditional ways of milling flour on stones that has gone by the wayside as we've gone to more modern, faster ways of milling on steel rolls. Most folks, I often take them through the education of the difference between roller milling and stone milling. In stone milling, you're grinding the whole bran coat and the nutritious germ particle into the flour in order to make a flour that lends itself to fermentation and baking. In roller milling, it is a way to shear the endosperm part of the kernel, which is where the white flour is located, and separate that from the bran so that you can have a white flour where the bran and the germ have been removed. So white flour is made on roller mills. Stone mills make a whole grain flour. So we were really focused on making whole grain nutritious flours for bakers in a different and traditional way.
Fantastic. You also work with local business leaders and community members to bring the cultivation and process of heritage grains back to, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it correctly, but I think it's Skowhegan, Maine. In fact, I think you're using a former jail. Please talk about how you've gone about creating this community and what you've accomplished today.
Yes, absolutely. So here in Skowhegan, Maine, which is where we set up our mill business, we did end up purchasing a historic county jail building that was built in 1897 to start our mill. And the reason we did that was because not only was it an available downtown building with vertical height, it has 4 stories, so that's helpful in milling. We can send grain up to the 4th story and gravity feed it down through machines on the way down through our cleaning machines. So that was a helpful piece about this building. But also it's on the cornerstone of our historic district in an agricultural area that has always seen industries in paper and wood products and shoemaking and broom making and milling in its history. So agricultural products are important to the livelihood and the business community here. So yes, we set up our startup mill in an old jail building, and it's been a highly visible project that has attracted a lot of attention in recent years, given what we're doing. The interest of late in heritage grains is really where Maine Grains carves out a unique niche in the marketplace. You hear a lot of talk about people being sensitive to wheat or allergic to wheat, or, you know, of late people avoid gluten for digestion and nutrition reasons. And some of that traces back to what we've been doing with wheat in the last 50 or so years to breed plants that perhaps work for our agricultural systems, but don't work so well for our digestive systems. So we can get into that some more, but we are definitely seeing some success working directly with small farms in the Northeast to grow out rare, old heritage variety seeds that are acclimated to Maine's climate and increase that seed supply so that we can get some of these special grains into commercial production.
You know, you did a great segue, because I was going to ask you all about sort of gluten-free and the heritage grains. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about what is it about Maine that makes it a great place to grow and harvest and stone grind these heritage grains, and talk a little bit about where the products from Maine Grains are currently distributed as well.
Sure. So, you know, unlike what most people might think, you know, in the U.S. we think of grains being grown in the heart of our country, in the Kansas wheatlands, where it's a bit hotter and drier. Maine is actually a cool, more moist climate. However, we do have a rich history of growing wheat, oats, rye, barley, flint corn in our area. So oats are one of the grains that we process here. They actually like a cool, sweet climate. They come up easily in our soils and have been used for decades as a natural crop rotation crop to actually manage weeds organically. So before we had chemicals to help manage weeds on farms, farmers planted things like oats and rye to outcompete those weeds in the soil. So oats and rye are still a common solution for organic weed management, and now the positioning of our mill in the marketplace also makes it possible for us to process those things into food-grade products. So it's really been beneficial to the infrastructure of Maine and the Northeast, and also I call it the ecosystem of the grain value chain in Maine for us to exist, creating food-grade products out of a crop that was also used to manage healthy soils.
So are you suggesting that some of the heritage grains may in fact be better from a digestive standpoint than what we're hearing about sort of with the gluten-free and the way, you know, grains are processed sort of more generally in the whole food process system?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of question lately about what might be going on with wheat in our digestive systems. And I was fortunate back in June to be able to travel over to Bologna, Italy, to a conference on just this very issue. It had to do with the science and discovery of land-raised heritage wheat varieties and the nutritional impact of those varieties. What we know is that we, as plant breeders and humans, we select seeds and plants for the traits that we're looking for. And in the last 50 or so years with wheat breeding, we've been focused on selecting for plants and kernels that have plump seed heads, that grow a shorter plant to allow for the mechanization of harvest. We've been selecting for varieties that have maximal yield per acre or maximal yield per kernel, so that we get the most flour out of the kernels that we harvest possible. So what I like to tell people is that it's also possible to select and breed plants that have optimal flavor or a wonderful color that lends itself to your breads and baked goods. We could also be selecting for digestibility. So there is new attention being paid to were those grains before we started breeding for more modern traits, were those grains more digestible at one time? Were they more nutritious? Did they have more minerals? Were they more digestible? And so scientists are now turning their attention to answering those questions, and there is preliminary evidence that may have been the case, that those wheats and grains that predated modern breeding have different nutritional characteristics and better digestibility. Now, we'll know a lot more in the next decade as scientists really dig into this issue. So I'm looking forward to staying on top of the research as it comes out, but certainly focusing on diversifying the grain varieties that we have in our regions will help.
And the products that you have under Maine Grains, could you talk a little bit about your product lineup and where you distribute today?
So our current product lineup includes spring wheat made into whole wheat flour and sifted flours, which are kind of our all-purpose line. We mill about 40% of our business is organic rolled oats. We also process organic rye flour, spelt flour, cornmeal, buckwheat. We sell the stone ground flour as well as the whole grain, because we're starting to see some bakeries that actually want to mill their own flour inside the bakery right before they bake. So in that case, we sell them what's called the berry, the grain berry, before it's been cracked open. And another large segment of our business now, about 17% of our business currently, is to breweries. So in the Northeast and beyond, craft brewing is becoming a big market and a big deal as communities restore their village breweries. And so we sell our grains to brewers that use them to add flavor and color and texture to their beers. So we're focused up here in Maine on distributing pretty much to the Northeast market, from Maine to New York City, a little bit down in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. We do sell a little bit out into the Washington, D.C. area. We have not built our business to be one that is focused on national markets, but rather a regional market. And here in Maine, for us, Boston and New York are very big regional markets that we're able to serve.
That's really terrific. You've also have a kneading, as in K-N-E-A-D, conference and artisan bread fair, which you co-founded. Could you describe a little bit what happens at these conferences, who comes, and what's been created because of it?
Thanks for the question. So the Kneading Conference is the effort that started in 2007 that began all of this, that began the conversations between the grain players in this cluster that make our businesses possible. So it has become an annual event ever since. We host it every late July up here in central Maine, and it attracts bakers and researchers and people interested in brewing and grain at all levels to focus on 2 days of intensive workshops on topics anywhere from brewing your own home batches of beer to making artisan pastries with whole grains, to how to perfect the craft of sourdough bread baking and beyond. So it's really become not only a celebration of regional grain economies and spurring regional efforts in grain, but it's really connecting bakers and professionals in a way that we sometimes liken to a bread camp, if you will, where folks can reunite and connect with each other. Several years into planning the event, we realized that our local communities right nearby wanted to come and experience pieces of it. They wanted to buy loaves of bread and get involved in some way. So we added the Artisan Bread Fair, which wraps up the 2-day kneading conference, where we blow the doors open and we let folks come in and see what's happening. The bread fair now brings in about 3,000 people for a celebration around wood-fired baking demonstrations, buying artisan loaves of bread, listening to live music, enjoying local food. So it's a fun time, and we're really pleased that it's really taken off and that we can host something like that here in Central Maine.
You know, from what I've read, it seems that even Skowhegan, I think is how you pronounced it, has had a bit of a renaissance. It was, at some time ago, the hub of New England's breadbasket. Can you talk a little bit about what's happened inside the community itself? What businesses are coming back? What things are happening to sort of say this little town can be something pretty significant?
Sure, that's a great question, and I mentioned early on in the interview that our discussions around looking at our past, our agricultural past, and our industrial past are informing kind of the ideas and steps we take moving forward. But as you suggest, many of these rural towns, like Skowhegan, have struggled with the loss of industries that have left our communities. In Skowhegan, we have a rich shoemaking history. Our woods and waters are part of the natural resource assets that we have here, and so wood products and the industries like making toothpicks and tongue depressors and paper have all thrived here at one time. But many of those industries have left the area or have gone overseas, and with the loss of those jobs, communities like ours struggle to figure out how we will employ people and maintain a nice quality of life. So in 2005, Skowhegan became a designated Main Street community. There are many Main Street communities across the country, but essentially it's an approach to revitalizing your community that receives guidance from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And by design, it involves pulling together members of the business community, the town government officials, as well as citizens to really take inventory of your assets and figure out how the community wants to move forward in revitalizing rural communities. So some of that energy really started with the Main Street program here in Skowhegan, and the Kneading Conference and the highlighting of our local food here in the region has become a big, big part and a focal point of an improved community, a community that's changing and finding hope in the things that we can do and that we do have to accentuate here.
And I think there's been some recognition of that. In 2013, you received the Maine Downtown Center's prestigious Downtown Visionary Award. And in 2015, you were named one of Maine Biz Magazine's Women to Watch. What have these awards meant to you, and what would you like your legacy to be?
Oh, thank you. It's been certainly humbling and a real testament to the hope that people want to have for communities like this. I don't think grist mills are the answer for every small community, but I do think that folks are hungry for a project to rally behind and that can help organize a town's efforts. And certainly for Skowhegan, the grist mill being located in the center of the town in a very symbolic project with a historic jail being turned into a productive hub of healthy food production has been a real a symbol and something that folks can rally around. So I've certainly been honored to be a part of that and receive support and recognition for that. So it does mean a lot.
And when you think back on sort of your successes to date, what really is the highlight for you? What makes you feel proudest?
I think the highlight for me, yesterday I was giving a tour to a bus group of about 30 people, and every time I tell the story of our early beginnings of this idea and each little step that has built up where we are today, I think probably what I'm most proud of is the cumulative effect of continuing to work hard and persist at a goal over a long period of time, even when you feel like you're not making huge strides all at once, but several years in, you can look back and see that each little success that we had along the way really does add up to a big success. So We've now renovated a pretty impressive BMS jail building to include not only the mill, but we've got tenants in our building that are also entrepreneurs who have started a knit shop and a community-run radio station and a cafe that features our grains that are made here on site. We're now the host of a 20-member farmers market and really have become a central point of vitality in our downtown. So never in my wildest dreams would I have pictured where we are today, and yet here we are. So I think I would hope for other projects that they set their sights on the long path.
What would be your advice to someone wanting to bring back tradition maybe to their community? As you said, it might not necessarily be stone grinding or stone milling, but something else. What would you give them for advice?
Boy, I think my advice would be to listen and seek out the stories in your community. My path started with going to interview some of the elders in our community just to get their stories, not only because I wanted to know what had happened here before, but I wanted to make sure that their perspectives were integrated into our plan. And I think that that's critical. I also think that being able to examine the why is really important, and I'll give a quick example. So I have a farmer this year who tried growing wheat for us, and he came to me last week and he said that unfortunately there was a lot of what you would call contamination of rye in his wheat field. So what that means is that when he harvested his wheat, the wheat is all mixed with rye. Well, in some of my conferences and dealings and learnings about grain in recent years, I learned that in old French traditions, you might actually mill flour that is a combination of wheat and rye, and bread bakers had very traditional ways to use it in special breads. So we might not need to look at this farmer's plight or issue as a problem. We might be able to look at it as an opportunity to revive discussion about a cultural bread that was once important to France. So, understanding why do you think those breads were part of French tradition? Probably because those farmers were having the same issue with intermixing of wheat and rye in the fields. I don't know, but that's what I would guess. And so we're going to try to turn that obstacle into an opportunity.
Well, fantastic. And with that, Amber, I want to thank you so much for your time, for what you've done in terms of your community in Maine, for the success that you're having with Maine Grains. And I'm going to turn it back to Don.
Thank you so much.
Well, all I know, it's been a fascinating interview. Going back a little bit, we've been talking with Amber Lamke. Your website again, Amber, for people who want to know more?
It is mainegrains.com. Maine as in the state, M-A-I-N-E, grains with an S.
What a wonderful. We will have a link on foodandwineinsider.com tonight where you can hear this and every other past and future Food and Wine Insider program. And you can also tell us if there's a guest you'd like to hear. Again, Ann Lambke, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Don.
Marcus Lemonis, J.D. Powers, and John Scully, and 100 other presidents and experts contributed to recalculating the book. Why did all these people agree to contribute to the book? I'm Don Mazzella, and I'm the editorial director of Small Business Digest. And for 20 years, we have been offering small business leaders information and data to increase profits. Recalculating the book was named the best small business book by the Independent Press Association. Whether you need help with marketing, staffing, finance, operations, technology, or many other subjects, they're all here in Recalculating the Book. They're now available at Amazon at a reduced cost. We've also created the radio program Recalculating on recalculating.biz.
You've been listening to Food and Wine Insider with Ann Daw and Don Mazzella. Want to join us on a future show? Contact us at foodandwineinsider.com. Until next time, have a passion for food, wine, and profits, and think of our program, Food and Wine Insider.